Hello and welcome to Property Question Time, the show where you get the opportunity to ask questions to our panel of property experts. Welcome. I'm Joti Patel, and here with me today I have Simon Zutshi, a financially independent property investor with 2 decades of experience investing in residential property in the UK and overseas. And I have Stefano Lucatello, senior partner and head of Kobalt Law International Lawyers, who's known for his knowledge of English and foreign law to advise global clients. And all the way from Australia, I have Paul Mahoney, CEO of Nova Financial Group. Thank you for joining us today. So, as usual, we have a huge amount of questions being emailed in to us. So, Stefano, first question, nice question actually. The UK is too busy and noisy for us, and we want to retire somewhere peaceful in Italy. Where do we go?
Is that it?
That's it.
Wow, how long have you got? Italy, yes, great choice. My parents come from Italy, so I'm slightly biased towards Italy. Like any country, what is your budget? I think that's the first thing. Mm-hmm. Do you like the sea? Do you like the countryside? Do you like the mountains? Mixture of both. Let's say that you've got a medium-sized budget. I would choose somewhere like the Marche region, or the Marches as we call them in English. Right. That's the region of Italy that overlooks the Adriatic, halfway up Italy's leg on the Adriatic side. Mm-hmm. Very good. Why? Because if you've got children and a small family, you can have the pleasure of both the sea and the mountains within an hour distance of each other. Oh, okay. So if you get sick of one, you can take the kids to the other and vice versa. The plots of land that you can buy and the houses that go with the territory are very big, and the costs of buying a house in that area are medium. They're not high and they're not low, but in the middle. You can get fantastic properties where you are next to each other, but you don't see your neighbour because the plots of land are so big. You get your money's worth in that area. It's also seismically, because Italy over the last 10 or 15 years has been prone to earthquakes. Seismically, it is a reasonably stable, literally stable area to live in. So you've got to make the considerations as to budget, geographical area. What I'd say, as I always say, is go there on a number of occasions, see it as its worst, see it as its best, autumn, summer, winter, spring. If you're going to buy, don't buy straight away. We've said this over and over again, and I'll continue to say this. Rent. See if you can get an arrangement with the vendor so that he will deduct what you pay as rent for the first 6 or 12 months off the purchase price. And then come and go. Use different airports and see it. Try it. Just like a car, you've got to try it. You can't just go there and imagine that you will be happy by settling in the first place that you go to.
And you make a very interesting point, because we're used to seeing countries like Italy when they're at their best, when the sun's shining and it's in holiday mode, but actually going all year round, you will get a different experience.
I mean, different parts of Italy in winter are different, totally different, from the south of Italy, where you get sunshine but it's still very cold, to the north of Italy, which is very humid, snow, rain, torrential rain. Also be careful, because if you're going to places like Tuscany and Umbria, certain areas in the winter are liable to landslip, landfall, mountains are slipping. People had a client recently who woke up one morning in winter and found that his access road had disappeared down a valley, and he couldn't get out of his own property and had to be airlifted. I mean, that's pretty serious, but you have to be careful now. And now you have to be very, very particular in what you buy, where you look for it. Take your time. I always say to people, take 12 to 18 months to buy your property. Don't rush into it, because if you rush in, you will only have to sell the property and lose to lawyers' fees, estate agents' fees. Everyone else but you will gain. And it also could cause you a matrimonial problem if you're married.
Well, of course, and as they say, fools rush in, so yeah,
absolutely,
very wise word.
Absolutely.
And also, you make a very good point about earthquakes. I mean, that is something we just don't think about in this country. No. We don't think about mudslides and earthquakes, so yes.
I mean, in France, for example, where they have a very strong purchasing system, you get told if you're buying in a seismic region, and you get told whether it's a red area or a green area, and you can tell immediately if the region has taken appropriate remedies or made appropriate remedies for evacuation, that sort of thing. In Italy, we don't have that yet.
And where would you personally buy? Because obviously you don't have little young children, I'm assuming, so where would you say?
Well, my father is from Tuscany, and I think Tuscany is the most beautiful region of Italy. Yes.
What about yourself, Simon?
I love visiting Italy. I love Italian food. I wouldn't know where to buy, but I would take on what Stefano said about why not go and travel the whole country? Because there's such variety in Italy. If you're going to go and set there, really make sure you make the right decision. And there's another thought as well, which is just a bit of a twist on this. Often people think, I have to go and buy and live somewhere. With this day and age of Airbnb, you can go and rent really nice places for months on end and not have the hassle of ownership.
No.
So I would encourage people to always think about, do you really want to put down a big chunk of money and get a mortgage in a foreign country when you may not need to?
No.
There's a lot of responsibility, so yeah, that's a very good point. Thank you. Okay, over to you, Simon. So my new landlord is insisting that I use a specific energy provider, but I do not wish to change it. I understand this is illegal with the exception where the landlord pays the bill and then charges the tenant. In my case, I am responsible for paying the provider. They gave me a letter stating they will charge £50 for gas and £50 for electricity if I change, as a fee for then changing it back. The contract states I am free to change with their permission, but that was not made clear to me until the contract was signed. What can I do now?
Okay, so a couple of points here. First of all, the basic premise is right. When you move into a property, if it's a single AST contract, you as a tenant are responsible to pay for all of the utility bills. If it's an HMO, the landlord might often include the bills as part of the rent. So in this case, single let, they're responsible for the bills. And they can choose anyone they want to supply that electricity, gas and water. However, it sounds like there has been a clause in the contract whereby they have to get permission from the owner of the property. Now, you can put anything you want in a contract, but it has to be fair and reasonable. So I would suggest if they want to they could potentially go to court and say, no, we're changing it and we don't agree with this. And if a judge rules that it's being unfair, they won't have to pay. But that seems a lot of hassle. I would just say to the landlord, look, why do you want us to use this particular supplier? What's the logical reason for that? They might be getting a little bit of commission, but it'll be pence in the pound. It's not really going to be a huge amount of difference. And I'll just appeal to their good nature, say, look, we don't want to use them. We want to use these people. When we move out, we'll give you the meter rings. It's a very small admin job to be able to move over. So I'd appeal to their better nature. And if they're really upset about it, they can say, well, tell you what, after 6 months or after 4 months, we can give our notice. You're going to lose the tenants.
Exactly.
And actually, it might be more expensive in case the landlord has a void period when they have no tenant in place. So, and that they're going to have costs of getting a new tenant in. So I would kind of go nicely at first, try to appeal to their better nature. If they're being fussy, say, well, okay, we'll do what you want, but ultimately we're just going to leave.
Well, that makes sense. I mean, it's about keeping it simple, isn't
Exactly,
it? And most landlords, like you say, would prefer not to lose their tenant over something like a contract.
In fact, you want to hold on to good tenants.
Of course.
So you can put anything you want in the contract as long as it's reasonable. And there's another lesson here, which is make sure you always read the contract. If you're signing it, you've got to make sure you understand what you're committing to.
Well, it's amazing how people sign contracts and don't really understand what they are committing to. So
the problem is sometimes that when Simon says ASTs, assured short-hold tenancies, people think that all assured short-hold tenancies follow the same model.
No, they don't.
They don't. That's the point. I mean, there's the basis of the minimum that needs to be in an AST, but then landlords usually
Put
expand
extra clauses,
they put extra clauses,
yeah,
absolutely,
that's right.
which mirror the location of the property, the physical actual layout of the property or whatever. So you've got to be very careful. And landlords have an obligation to put, the other side of the coin is that landlords have an obligation to put the minimum amount in an AST contract with all the notices about all the different things that are, have you done this, have you done that? And now, I mean, when Simon and I started off many years ago, an AST contract in 1988 was something completely different. It's now totally different, and it's got a lot more notice periods, notices at the end of the agreement itself. And the landlords have to be very careful that they've adhered to everything, otherwise it can be declared illegal by a first-tier tribunal.
Yeah.
And this sounds so second nature to obviously people like you in the know, but to the average person, we wouldn't know this stuff unless we had shows like this which give us this insight.
That's a great reason for watching the show.
Absolutely. Thank you. Question for you, Paul. My mum wishes to sell me her house that she's been renting out to the value of 125k, but she said I could buy it for 90k to help pay less stamp duty. Are there any tips that you know of on how I can avoid fees, especially the legal fees such as stamp duty? I was thinking of putting my name on the deeds and then remortgaging and then taking my mum's name off the deed. What advice do you have, Paul?
I think you're overcomplicating it. If you look at the current stamp duty thresholds, the bottom threshold is 125,000. So anything under that, you don't actually pay any stamp duty. So regardless of whether it's 125 or 90, there's no stamp duty payable unless you already own a property. So for example, if you already own a property, you would pay 3% of whatever you're paying for that property. But it seems this is your first purchase, so there won't actually be any stamp duty payable. So far as mitigating other fees like legal fees and things, you know, there's a very broad range of legal fees out there when purchasing property. You can deal with a conveyancer, which will usually be a bit cheaper than a solicitor, but you also want to make sure you're getting the right advice, because when you're buying property, you need to make sure that, you know, you're ticking all the boxes, not just for yourself and your own peace of mind, but also for potential lenders and things that they're going to look out for, which could potentially make your property less valuable. If for example, there's any easements or lease concerns or anything like that around the property, you want to be made aware of it. So seeking the right professional advice, you know, I would say for a few extra £100, or you know, generally it will be in that range, to get the right advice, it's worth doing it. Although I understand that sometimes your budget only allows for, you know, certain things. So as far as the stamp duty goes, it doesn't seem like you'll pay any anyway. Legal fees I've spoken about, and look, that's pretty much the fees that you're going to be incurring when purchasing this property. So hopefully that helps.
Thank you very much, Paul, and thank you, gentlemen. We shall take a short break now, and we'll be right back in just a few moments. Hello and welcome back to Property Question Time. I'm Joti Patel, and just before the break we were joined by our guest panel. We have Simon Zutshi, Stefano Lucatello and Paul Mahoney in Australia. Thank you for coming back to us. Okay, Stefano, another question for you. Do you know what will happen to my Italian property if I don't have an Italian will after I die?
Is that it?
That's it.
Right, okay. Yes.
Okay.
The answer to your question is yes, I do. Italy, France, Spain, Portugal all have a system of Roman law, which then became the Napoleonic Code, developed by Napoleon wherever he conquered nations. And we have a system of civil law in Italy, which is part of the Napoleonic Code, which means that in Italy you cannot leave in an Italian will your property as you would in England. So, for example, if we were married and the usual thing is that husband leaves to wife, wife leaves to husband, and then eventually when the two husband and wife died, everything goes to the children in equal shares. In Italy you can't do that, France, Spain, Portugal, all the same, because they have a strict code which says what you can leave to whom and in what proportions, dependent on whom you leave behind. The idea was that Napoleon, when he conquered other countries, came back to find that the wives of the soldiers had done all sorts of things with the properties that the men who had been fighting abroad had worked so hard to buy, and then in many cases had got rid of the properties. So the law was changed, and Napoleon changed the law to favour the children. So there is no situation in Italy, France, Spain, and Portugal, any other civil jurisdiction, which says that you can exclude the children. So dependent on who you leave behind, the child or the children of the family have a certain percentage that they would automatically inherit. Now, this is the intro, and it's something that we can almost now sweep away because of new legislation which came into effect in 2015 for the European Union. Although the United Kingdom derogated out of this, which means it didn't sign up to it, it's still part of it and it still uses it. And this is something called Brussels 4, or Regulation 850 of 2012. And it's the European succession rules, which say that I can, as a United Kingdom citizen in this case, leave my foreign property in accordance with, I would think, United Kingdom law, which is better than Italian law. It doesn't stop you from having to pay your beneficiaries when you've died, paying Italian succession tax, because they don't have inheritance tax. It's completely different abroad. But it allows you to leave your foreign property in accordance with English law, which means you can leave your property to your wife in its entirety, excluding under Italian law, as it would be a child or children of the family. So you can do that. So the best thing, many years ago, before 2015 came along, as lawyers we used to say, if you're buying a house in France, Spain, Italy or Portugal, English will and Italian will, English will, French will, etc., etc. Now you don't need to.
Right.
There is a lot of debate, I have to say, between us lawyers as to whether this European succession rule means that you can do just one will. My view is that you can make one will, which is European Union will. It can cover your foreign property. It also means that if you buy other property abroad, you don't need to make another will in another country, because that will that you've made will be valid for the other countries. One note of caution, again, to repeat, is that just because you change the law in which you leave your property, it doesn't mean to say that you will not have to pay, or your estate will have to pay, succession tax when you die in that country. So my advice to them is, make an Italian will if you want to, make an English will if you want to, but the best solution is to make a European Union will under the succession rules of what's called Brussels 4.
Wow, there's so much to think about. I mean,
Yeah.
who would have even considered that? But it's a relief for people from here who are buying over there. But if you're Italian, living in Italy, and you don't even get on with your children, you're saying that they still get the property.
Well, you see, of course, the Italians could do the other way around. The Italian can leave his Italian property in accordance with English law if he wants to,
Right.
or French law, Spanish law, whatever suits them best. It's just that we can't, United Kingdom always derogates from something in the European Union. Our Chancellor of the Exchequer at the time said, I'm not going to allow you to leave your English property in accordance with Italian law. Why? Because if you think about it, at death, the Chancellor of the Exchequer would lose out on a whole load of inheritance tax.
course,
It would go abroad.
What do you
So-
think, Simon? I mean, is that something you knew already?
I didn't know. I didn't know about the situation in particular over in Italy. And I think it's interesting. We get all these laws from Brussels, and it'd be interesting to see how things change when the UK finally comes out of the European Union. What's going to change? What's going to stay the same? And I guess
Well, this
kind of
one won't
watch this space.
This one won't
will be
change.
the
This
same.
one won't change. People ask me on a regular basis whether Brexit will have any effect on the European will. No, it won't, because it's not a political device.
Right.
It's a point of private international law,
Right.
which is totally disconnected or unconnected with whether we are in or out of Europe.
Yeah,
Well, that's
okay,
good to know.
interesting,
That'll
yeah.
give some reassurance to viewers out there
Yes.
watching and
Yeah,
thinking about
absolutely,
buying
yeah.
homes over there.
Just also goes to show how you need someone who understands the local
Absolutely.
market rather than trying to figure out yourself. It's a minefield.
Of
It
course,
really is.
yeah. Well, thank you for sharing that. Simon, I'm a new owner of an occupier of a 4-bedroom house, and I've lived there for 30 years. I'm thinking of renting a couple of bedrooms out as I'm studying and my income has considerably reduced. If I rent out 2 of the spare bedrooms, does that mean the property will be a HMO? If so, how different is that from having just one lodger? Thank you in advance for any advice.
Okay, so a couple of things there. First of all, you're perfectly within your rights to rent out rooms within your home. In fact, the government actually encourage it. They have a tax incentive called a rent a room scheme, where currently this tax year you can earn £7,500 tax-free by renting out rooms in your home. So actually, if someone is in a situation where they don't quite have enough income, if there's the right kind of family mix, that's a really good thing to consider. Now, interesting with regard to HMOs. Technically, an HMO definition is actually 3 or more unrelated people living in a house. So if you live there and rent out 2 rooms, technically that will become an HMO. That doesn't mean, though, that it needs an HMO licence. In October 2018, the regulations are changing such that if you have a house of 5 or more people, you would need an HMO licence. So each council interprets the government guidelines in a different way. So what I suggest is this viewer contacts the local council, explains the situation to them and says, I don't think I need to, but do I need to get a licence or kind of register this at all? I don't think they do need to do that, but always worth checking. The other thing I'd mention is also when you have a lodger in your house, that's not like a normal tenant. You wouldn't have an AST rental contract. You'd have a special agreement with the lodger, and it's a bit more like a license, really. So if they didn't pay you rent, you could actually get rid of them much quicker. Hopefully that wouldn't be the problem, because hopefully the people you know, they're friends or people. But do make sure you have an agreement and you have a contract, because sometimes people allow a friend to come and stay, and unfortunately sometimes friends take advantage of each other. So if you have someone living in your house, make sure you have the correct paperwork, them signed up to an agreement, so you know where everyone stands.
So they are legally binding, even though they know this person?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm sure you've got
Okay.
some things to add to that.
Well, I mean, the only thing I was going to say is that, yes, when you have a lodger, it's more like akin to a licence, which is
Yes.
an informal agreement. It's not regulated.
Yep.
You can give as short or as long a notice as you want
It's
to.
like if someone stays in a hotel, a bit like
Yes.
that. If you don't pay your bill, you're out, basically.
Of course.
So they don't
Which
have
can be
the
an
normal.
awkward. Sorry.
Yeah.
that-
So, sorry.
You first.
I said they don't have the normal rights that a normal tenant would have
Yes.
under an AST contract. So
Yeah.
don't go giving lodgers AST contracts.
And the other thing to say on the tax side of things is don't try and be clever with the £7,500
Yes.
relief, because there are many people who think they've got 3 or 4 in, and one of the tenants or one of the lodgers may give them £7,500 in a year, and they don't declare the other 2. So be careful that the taxman doesn't come out. Sometimes they sit outside your door and they'll watch what happens, and then they come back to you and say, well, as far as we're concerned, you've earned 20,000, 30,000, and then it's up to you to prove that it's not true.
Yeah. So, you know, don't be greedy. Take the 7,500 tax-free and just declare the rest.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Okay, well, thank you for that. And final question to Paul. I'm currently in the process of getting a buy-to-let mortgage, which in time I would like to turn into a residential mortgage. The property is in need of works and an extension. Am I able to do this while it's on a buy-to-let mortgage? Or will it affect me when I come to changing it to residential? Any help is appreciated. What are your thoughts, Paul?
Okay, yeah, good question. The potential issues that you might have, given that you mentioned that it's in need of a lot of work, will really depend on how much work it's in need of, because whether it's a residential or a buy-to-let mortgage that you're looking to take on this property, the lender will send out a surveyor, and that surveyor will need to say that the property is habitable for you to get either of those types of mortgages on the property. Or in some cases, the lender might put in place some requirements, some things that you might need to do first to be able to get the mortgage. So without knowing the level of work that needs to be done or the severity of that work and whether that affects the habitability of the property, for example, does it have a working bathroom and kitchen, are two things that a lender or a surveyor will want to see for you to be able to get a mortgage at all. So far as taking a buy-to-let initially and switching it over to a residential, so long as you can get a buy-to-let mortgage, you shouldn't have any issues then switching it over to a residential. The question in my head would be why you're looking to do that initially, and what the benefit is of doing that. That wasn't part of your question, so I can't answer that. But assess all your options and seek some advice on what those options are, because you might have a narrow view of what those options are, but there might be other things out there that could work better for you and help you achieve the right outcome.
Thank you so much, Paul. Right, well, sadly, that's all we have time for today on Property Question Time. But as always, please do get in touch. Send us your questions via the website, www.property-tv.co.uk. Or you can email us at info@propertytelevision.tv. Finally, my thanks to our special panel today, Stefano Lucatello, Simon Zutshi and Paul Mahoney. And from me, Joti Patel, it's been a pleasure. Thank you so much, and we shall see you again soon.